My name is Bruce Mott and welcome to my show on InView TV. Normally you find me behind the camera doing the production work in our shows. We produce 4 live shows each week: Let's Get Deeper, At Home, The Midday Muster and What Matters. I felt it was about time I got in front of the camera. There's so much happening in the world today, good and bad. I felt a need to talk and talk about things that interest me and I hope interest other people around the world. So this is the first show. Welcome to it. We've got an amazing guest. I'm going to read out some of this gentleman's accomplishments because there's quite a few of them, and then we'll get to talk to him. So my guest today is a US Senator and a physician of over 35 years. He's a lifelong Minnesotan that moved to Carver County 30 years ago to raise a family and practice medicine. He's a Bachelor of Arts in physiology, a Doctor of Medicine, a Bush Fellow of Leadership and Policy Studies at the University of Minnesota, the founder and president of Catalyst Medical Clinic in Watertown, where he's a family physician, a clinical associate professor at the University of Minnesota Medical School. In 2015, he authored the book Relationship Matters: The Foundation of Medical Care is Fracturing. In 2016, he received the prestigious annual state award, Minnesota Family Physician of the Year. Also in 2016, he was elected at the Minnesota State Senate, receiving more votes than any other Republican state senator. In 2019, he authored and presented 7 unique bills on the Senate floor, and all 7 bills were passed unanimously. In 2020, he was asked by the Senate Majority Leadership to be chief author of the Insulin Safety Net Bill. After more than a year in gridlock, he got it passed in just 28 days. Also in 2020, he put forward a bill to create a new commission to probe drug price increases. I think it's fair to say my guest has had some unique qualities and credentials. However, in July this year, the Senator posted a video to Facebook advising he was under investigation by the Minnesota Board of Medical Practice in relation to a TV interview he did back in April. In this interview, the Senator stated he was advised to falsify death certificates with COVID-19 as the cause of death. He was also being investigated for comparing COVID-19 to the flu. Let's look at part of that interview or that video that the Senator did now.
Hi, Senator Scott Jensen. I represent Carver County. This is one of the most important videos I've made, and one of the hardest. Frankly, it's been a very difficult decision to make whether I even wanted to do it. Less than a week ago, I was notified by the Board of Medical Practice in Minnesota that I was being investigated because of public statements I had made. They listed 2 allegations. They said I've been spreading misinformation in regards to the completion of death certificates on a news program, which happened to take place on April 7th. And you could find that one. It was with Chris Berg if you wanted to. And the other allegation was that I provided reckless advice in my willingness to compare COVID-19 and the flu. When I got this letter, I was ticked. And quite frankly, I leaned into the comfort and wisdom of my family to help them, let them talk me off the cliff. But doggone it, if this can happen to me, my view is it could happen to anybody. I mean, I've been a family doc for 40 years. I work hard, I love my patients, I do house calls, I've been medical director, I've held staff positions in hospitals to help make things work better. I've been in the Senate for 4 years and I've learned a lot. I've never had anything like this happen. Shoot 'em out. 5 years ago I was named the Minnesota Family Doctor of the Year in Minnesota. And I get this because a couple people complained and I don't get to know who those people are. But this is an odd position for me to be in. And I am just stunned. But I should have seen it coming because I saw the threats on social media. I've seen them for the last 2 or 3 months. I've seen them come from physicians. I've seen them come from people in all walk of life. They didn't agree with me. They didn't like it, that I was trying to provide some context for the flu, for COVID-19. We've had some 40,000 cases of COVID-19 in Minnesota thus far. According to the Department of Health people, that might translate into 10 times that many. And if it does translate into 10 times that many, that's 350,000 cases. But in 2018, we had more than 500,000 Minnesotans with the flu. When I say that, am I recklessly giving you advice regarding COVID-19 and the flu? In terms of the death certificates, on April 3rd, I got an email from the Department of Health that said very clearly that we should report COVID-19 on death certificates if it is assumed to have caused or contributed. Well, that's not how we do death certificates. New York said, we're having more deaths in a certain period than we normally have, so those deaths must be COVID-19. We just didn't pick them up. So never mind the testing, we're adding 3,700 to our total, and oh, well, that does increase our total by 50%. So I'm in the position where I have to explain that I wasn't spreading misinformation. And I'm not being reckless when I talk about COVID-19 and the influenza both being single-stranded RNA viruses that are respiratory in nature with similar symptoms and can be spread through particulate matter and aerosol transmission. Governor Walz comes out, talks about 74,000 Minnesotans dying. Later on, he went back to 29,000, and right around then, I put a different video out saying just the facts. And I said, I'm not buying 74,000 Minnesotans dying, I'm not buying 29,000. And then this one came out a month later, right around May 1st. This is a model that they're using. And it says on here, Minnesotans model projects nearly 1,000 deaths a day in mid-July. Well, folks, that's next week. So far, we have less than, right around 1,500, of which all but 300 of them have occurred in people in long-term care facilities, in large part because the Department of Health participated in decisions that put people with active COVID-19 disease in the nursing homes. And I'm spreading misinformation. Of course I am. I don't know what to tell you. I just know this is wrong. I have this odd set of hats I'm wearing because I'm the vice chair of the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate, and I'm involved in policy discussions and involved in bills that deal with providing relief for COVID-19. And on the other hand, I've been a physician in the trenches for 35 years. So I try to connect the dots. I don't try to present myself to be something I'm not. I'm not an epidemiologist, but yes, I've taken epidemiology classes. I'm not an infectious disease doctor, but I take care of infectious disease every day. I just want to leave you with a couple of questions you could maybe ask yourself. Do we think it's okay for physicians to certify in death certificates that someone died of COVID-19, even if there was never a COVID-19 positive test obtained, even if there was never a COVID-19 test done, even if a COVID-19 test hadn't even been considered? And maybe the worst, even if the family had no clue that the death certificate they received for their loved one was going to say COVID-19. So, reckless advice regarding comparisons between COVID-19 and the flu.
Scott, got 30 seconds and then you'll be on.
Spreading misinformation, because I cried foul when I received a memorandum from the Department of Health on April 3rd, which directed me to a CDC link, which says clearly that you could have a patient suffering from other medical problems, wheelchair bound, severe stroke within the preceding year or two, no COVID-19 test ever done or ordered, and when that patient dies of pneumonia, it's a COVID-19 death. I cried foul.
Senator Scott Jensen, welcome to my show on InView TV. Are you there, Senator?
Yes, I can hear you.
Welcome to my show on InView TV. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Senator, I find that video very powerful. I've watched it a few times now, but I find that it comes across that you're obviously a very knowledgeable person, but the sincerity and the concerns that come across in that video, I've watched it a few times, and it's certainly, as I said, very powerful. But before we get into that video and the allegations that came from it, tell everybody a little bit about Scott Jensen, the person.
Thank you, Bruce. I was raised in a small town in southern Minnesota of about 4,000, and we had lots of farms, and we sort of grew up according to that old mantra, it takes a village to raise a child. My dad was my hero, and my mom was my best friend, and I had 4 siblings. I went to college at the University of Minnesota, and then I went into dental school, and I wasn't very happy with teeth. I left and went to the seminary for a year, and during that year I made 2 big decisions. I asked my girlfriend to marry me, and we've been married 42 years, and I also decided to go into medicine. So I had a wonderful medical career. I've been practicing family practice for 35 years, and 5 years ago I was convinced by some friends, people, that I should run for the Senate. So I've been in the Senate for 5 years. I wrote a book called Relationship Matters, and it's all about the fact that I think patients can and should be their own best champion of their health care. I think it comes when the patient feels responsible and in charge, and the physician is a partner and a resource. If I advocate for my patients, I will earn their trust over time, and that's the magic formula. I have found that over the last few months with how easy it is to be attacked, and I've always been a bit of a skeptic, and so when I started questioning things in April, it wasn't long that the mainstream media was attacking me, politicians were going after me, bureaucrats were going after me, and then in June my medical license was at risk, and so now my livelihood was being challenged, and I was grateful that after about a month the Board of Medical Practice dismissed the allegations, but then about 2 weeks ago I was notified that once again the Board of Medical Practice is investigating me, and my medical license is at risk because I get to know who my accuser is, but someone has said that I am a danger to public health.
A danger to public health, that's amazing. And as you've said many times, all you're doing is putting out information that is fact. You're not making anything up. You certainly don't come across as one of these conspiracy type people that we like to label everyone nowadays. And as you say, the most frustrating thing I guess is that you don't get to know who the accuser is. It could be anyone off the street that just doesn't like you for whatever reason, or whatever that case may be. And so I guess now you're under investigation again. You're going to have to spend, I don't know, how many hours responding to this investigation and preparing yourself for it.
It is very frustrating that I don't get to know who my accuser is. I do believe that what's happening is strongly political people who don't appreciate the fact that I'm challenging the conventional narrative and sharing deep concerns, the corruption of data and the violation of individual rights and the expansion of government in an unprecedented. I think that people have, if you will, they've actually weaponized the Minnesota Board of Medical Practice so that you go after me, make my life difficult. Hopefully, I guess they're probably thinking maybe they can muzzle me. And that's a real problem, because if it can happen to me, I think it could happen to anyone. Anybody that has a license or a certificate whereby an agency is charged with maintaining a certain standard. If you're a nurse or a teacher or a hairstylist and you have to get a certificate or some sort of licensure, and someone wanted to come after you, they can do it. And that's really, that tears my heart apart.
And with these latest allegations where they say you're a danger, have they gone into any detail on what that danger apparently is? Is it still stemming back from that video we just showed an excerpt from? Or is it a new video where you're now suddenly a danger to society? What is the detail around that supposed danger?
On July 20th and 21st, the Minnesota State Senate was called into special session. And both July 20th and July 21st videos
challenging some of the conventional narrative. I feel strongly that kids have to get back to school. And I feel strongly that we need to have more than just the governor of Minnesota making decisions. And we need to share the calculated risks that are part of responding to a pandemic like this. I spoke these words, and I also was very concerned about the fact that the public trust, the trust that exists or needs to exist between politicians and the citizens, it has been broken and it needs to be rebuilt. And so the videos I put on Facebook on July 20th and 21st seem to have cataloged new complaint and have indicated that I'm a danger to public health because in some way or another my comments about getting kids back in school or that another lockdown is not necessary and that even masks, I believe the decision regarding masks is now more based on fear and apprehension than it is on solid science. Years of virology and the science of masks thrown out the window during a 5-month frenzy. And fine, I'll wear a mask, but I don't think that these decisions are being made on what I would consider solid science. I think there's a lot of disagreement all around the world. So I think those are some of the things that informed that complaint. But again, the person making the complaint has no obligation to demonstrate any due cause. So in terms of doing some research and if you will, carefully crafting the words of an allegation, it's not done at all. It can be done in 3 or 4 sentences on an internet website.
Amazing. And then, yeah, someone does that, goes on the website, 4 or 5 sentences, and all of a sudden your life and livelihood is in danger. And it seems to me they take a guilty to you prove yourself innocent approach to it, which makes it even harder for you. You mentioned the masks, so I was going to ask you about masks. You've already mentioned that. What about the tests themselves? You read and you hear across different reports about how accurate these tests are that they're doing for COVID. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, clearly any testing that we do is always going to be, if you will, measured by its level of false positives, false negatives, true positives, true negatives, sensitivity, specificity. What we've learned recently, and it was interesting that the New York Times was the media source that really broke the story, but with the PCR test that we use to detect acute disease, typically this is an amplification test. We find a small snippet of, if you will, the genetic code of the COVID-19. We amplify it, doubling it every time we cycle. Well, normally when we do this in trying to diagnose a viral illness, we usually cycle somewhere between 25 and 33 times. And by do that one doubling, you're into the billions. But when you make a decision to allow continued cycling to go on past 33 cycles and get up to 40, now you're talking about trillions of copies of this genetic being made. And at that point in time, you might be able to detect a very small piece of dead viral strand, and it has no be infectious. You could never grow viral, if you will, pathogenic virus level. So when we tell people, yes, you have a positive test, and we're cycling 40 times, we return to a more normal cycle threshold of 33, then the New York Times released this article where some 1,000 people that had been told that they had COVID-19, they were positive tests, actually 850 of them would have been negative because they didn't turn positive until 33 cycles had been exceeded. So in that situation, we've got 1,000 people told, yes, you've got COVID-19, but in actuality, if we're looking at someone who can actually spread the disease, we may have 850 of them that should have been told your COVID test is negative. So testing has really been, I think all around the world it's been a challenge, but I think in the United States we've really had difficulty. In February and March, the CDC stumbled and bumbled a bit. Then we had the CDC commingling testing, whereby the PCR test results were virology testing. So we really didn't have a good picture of how much testing is actually being done. Sometimes tests were being done, but we weren't being told how many unique individuals were having tests done. It has been a major challenge, and it's an important part of trying to respond in the ideal way to a pandemic.
So with that testing, you mentioned that rather than 33 cycles, doing 40 cycles, and how that changes the result. But why are we doing that? Why have we gone from 33 to 40? Was it in the belief the test was going to be more accurate, or belief, I don't know. Why would you go from 33 to 40 all of a sudden?
Well, in a sense, Bruce, that really is the million-dollar question. What's the motivation? There were multitudes of virologists, epidemiologists, infectious disease specialists in this country that when they learned this, just raised an eyebrow and said, why? Why would we do that? Why would anyone allow that? But for or another, the FDA, in providing these emergency use authorizations for the test manufacturers, did indeed allow many of them to use 40 cycles. And some of the manufacturers have said that they felt that this would allow them to, if you will, harvest the greatest pickup. But they were sort of turning a blind eye towards, did the result really infectiousness, or did it rather simply reflect that a small rogue piece of COVID-19 virus that may have been present for weeks or months somewhere else was being picked up? So I think that looking at it now, people are indeed asking themselves, why did we do that? Maybe we shouldn't have. But the fact of the matter is, as a physician, I'm not being told how many cycles are being run on my patient's tests. I know this is a negative test or this is a positive test. If I were told this is a positive test, but it became positive at 37 cycles or 40 cycles, that would be potentially helpful, because the lower number of cycles that it needs to run, most likely the higher viral load. So if we run a test on a patient and in the first 5 or 10 cycles, we may well have a situation where this person has a substantial viral load and could be much greater. But once we get past 25 cycles, now we're in a situation where it's very possible that this person who has a, quote, positive PCR test may not be able to spread it at all, may not be able to grow out any positive viral cultures.
So it seems to me it's just an exercise to get numbers up. If as you say, the cycles goes up, and it means the person's not even infectious because the amount of virus that's actually inside them is so minute. All it appears to be achieving is making the COVID case load go up. For what reason? Who would know? No idea. I want to talk about another thing. Sorry, you want to say something there, Scott?
Bruce, to your point, I mean, I think you're hitting on something very important, and that has to do with the whole concept of, and inadvertently or for whatever, corrupting the data. Initially, complaints were about Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC corrupting the process of precisely trying to determine a sequence of causation in determining the underlying cause of death for an individual. But then we moved on from there and we saw other data sources being corrupted. And so now here we are with the PCR test, and that appears to have been tarnished, corrupted, whatever word you want to choose. And how can we help but think that there must be some underlying motive? We have positive tests being reported, but then we find out later that 10,000 positive tests doesn't mean 10,000 people had COVID-19. Some of the patients that had COVID-19 2, 3, or 4 times in that amount. So then we find out that, yes, 10,000 positive tests reflected that 6,000 people had COVID-19. This kind of gaming feels underhanded. And again, I don't mean to sound redundant, but it fractures that public trust. And in a time of an epidemic and pandemic like this, the public trust in leaning into personal responsibility is one of the most powerful tools a government has in terms of trying to accomplish what we need to accomplish.
Yeah, you're certainly right about trust. There appears to be a growing lack of trust in how how we've responded to COVID around the world. Here in Australia, we've got every state seems to have its own way of approaching and responding to COVID. Some have locked their borders and no one can go in and out of the state. Others are practically turning into a militarized state in trying to oppose lockdowns and things like that. And it is creating an atmosphere of lack of trust, there's no doubt. And when we hear things like what you've just mentioned, or we see constantly how the modelling has changed, we don't actually ever get to see what the model really is or what it was based on, but the model of X amount of deaths per day is now a different model, it's now a different number. And we just seem to have to expect that, oh, we got it wrong last time, this is what the new modelling looks like. And we're expected to accept that. And yet, this is just building distrust amongst society. Certainly that's what I'm seeing in Australia, and from the snippets I see overseas, that seems to be occurring as well. I want to mention hydroxychloroquine. We're hearing more and more about this. At one stage, it was a case of, because President Trump mentioned it, people started ridiculing him and HCQ, as it's called itself. Then we hear that in some countries where they are using it, there seems to be a less rate of COVID cases. And then here in Australia, I mean, I believe this has been around since the 50s, this medicine, but here in Australia it's now in one particular state, it's all of suddenly outlawed. And if a doctor prescribes it, you know, he can be charged for it. What's your thoughts on HCQ?
Bruce, it was a little choppy there. Our connection isn't the best, but I believe that your question focused on the utilization of hydroxychloroquine and how is government intersecting or interfacing with the very cherished relationship between a physician and a patient and their opportunity and responsibility and right to together put together a plan for how they might want to address their health needs. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Exactly correct, Scott.
Well, then I'm going to go ahead and try to respond to that because, again, I'm not catching all of your words. Hydroxychloroquine is an interesting drug. It's been on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines for more than half a century. Personally, hydroxychloroquine for many of my patients with inflammatory arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, preventative treatment. My wife was on hydroxychloroquine for more than a decade because of her inflammatory arthritis. I feel very comfortable with the drug. In Minnesota, the governor sort of did dispense the medicine even if there was a legitimate and appropriate prescription from a doctor. After about 4 months, the governor of Minnesota rescinded that action. So in Minnesota now, physicians can prescribe it and pharmacists can dispense it. It's related to chloroquine, and it's also related to quinine. Quinine actually comes from the bark of a tree. Hydroxychloroquine is a modulator. It's not just an anti-inflammatory agent. It seems to make it difficult for the COVID-19 virus to accomplish what it tries to accomplish. And at the very basic level, COVID-19 wants to hack its way into the cell and then hijack the cell's machinery so that all that cell really does is just make more and more replications of the COVID-19 virus. Hydroxychloroquine makes that more difficult. Now, what we've unfortunately done with people suffering from COVID-19 is we've said, you have two pathways to go. You will either get better on your own, or you will, and if you get bad enough, we may end up putting you in the hospital. And patients are very fearful of going in the hospital. Patients with COVID-19 that go in the hospital don't necessarily do super well. Often they progress, and they may well end up having to consider some heroic measures, including ECMO devices or ventilators. So patients and doctors are saying, if a person has COVID-19 and over the first 2 or 3 days, things are going in the wrong direction, and patient isn't getting better, but isn't necessarily at the point where they need to consider going to the emergency room and considering hospitalization, patients would like to be able to do something, anything, to turn the tide so that at home they can utilize medications. And I think that that's reasonable. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of doctors, when they're using hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc. I would tell patients that even right now, if they don't have the disease, they should still think, go out and start exercising more, lose 5 to 10 pounds, get on some prophylactic zinc, take, if you will, vitamin D, and see if that doesn't help you fend it off. But if you do get it, I think the notion of a patient wanting to be able to try hydroxychloroquine in combination with other medications is not an unreasonable one. And I think that's really the crux of this whole discussion. Because why would some physicians say that patients shouldn't be able to have a decision-making role in this? And why would politicians and bureaucrats and ivory tower academicians say, we're not going to let you have that option? That doesn't make sense. This is a pretty darn safe drug, and we're talking about using it for a very short period of time.
It seems to me politics is interfering with medicine in a way that we've never seen before, and the medical industry has become politicized, and that can't be a good thing. If physicians can't be themselves and what they've learned from their studies and their life experiences, and they can't help their patient that way because politics is interfering, that's a dangerous path we're heading down.
The intersection of politics, big pharma, vaccine manufacturers, into the relationship between patient and physician is troubling. It's dangerous. And I absolutely understand why patients around the world are frustrated. They're feeling like their rights are being violated. They're feeling like they're pawns. The idea that we're supposed to sort of sit on our hands and either get the disease or not get the disease. And if we get the disease and it gets worse, we don't get to do anything about it unless we land in a hospital. And oh, by the way, wait patiently for this vaccine to be developed. If you look at our track record in terms of efficacious, safe vaccines to respiratory viruses, we haven't done that well. It may well be that a vaccine, the one that we want, might not ever be forthcoming. We might not ever be able to get it right. We might not ever get able to demonstrate the kind of safety profile that people would want before they have something injected. And if that's the case, then what we're left with is, if you will, developing a herd immunity. And the fact that some people might have disease resistance already within their DNA and their cells. Some people will develop cellular immunity through their T cells, and other people will develop antibodies through their humoral immune system. And that may end up being what we have available. We don't know.
Yeah, it's I guess it's I shouldn't use this word because I was going to say it's a frightening scenario, but I don't want to use that word because there's so much fear around the place as it is. But certainly this vaccine, yes, if it comes along, is it going to be the one that we want? How long before we get there with that vaccine? What are we going to do? Are we going to live in this new COVID safe world, whatever that means, because every country, every state's doing it differently? Look, one more question. We're running out of time here. I appreciate you coming on the show, Scott. Really appreciate it. Sorry that it's been a bit choppy with the audio and video. We'll get you back next time, and we'll get you a better internet connection or something. Last question though for you. I believe that you're not re-standing to be senator in November. Is that the case? And if so, what drove that decision?
Thank you, Bruce, for asking that question. I think that's a very appropriate question. And yes, I am not running. A year ago, I announced that I would not be seeking re-election this time around. My wife's had some health issues, and we wanted to, if you will, focus a little bit on the family. We have 6 grandchildren, all of them 3 years of age and under. And we thought that we should press pause. And we've been so blessed to be able to contribute and have wonderful. 6 months before we'd ever heard of COVID-19, I had made the decision to not run. And the last have been a remarkable journey for my wife and I and our family, as I've sort of been in the limelight because as a physician and as a senator and someone who has a robust appetite for infectious viruses, I've been in a position where I can help people connect the dots, and I am a skeptic, and I'm passionate about trying to provide people with context, because when we get information thrown at us at 100 miles an hour, only in understanding some context can we really get our arms around it, press pause, and thoughtfully consider what should we do, what's appropriate. Because I'm not a big fan of having people slide into the world of groupthink and get into an echo chamber where all we do is surround ourselves with people who tell us exactly what we want to hear. And that's a problem in politics in the United States.
I think it probably a bit wider than just the United States. Look, thank you, Scott. Thanks so much for being on the show. I hope to our viewers it was informative. You can obviously see Scott's a very passionate man, very sincere, very knowledgeable, obviously, and he's not out there to fearmonger or anything like that. He's just provide, as you said, provide context to the whole situation. So thanks again, Scott. Really enjoyed you being on the show. We definitely will get you back on the show, and good luck with the investigation and preparing and for that. Thanks again.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you so much.
Well, what an interesting interview. Scott Jensen, Senator Scott Jensen, amazing guy. Hope you learned something from what he was telling us all there. Sorry that the internet was a bit choppy. We will get him back and try and fix that up for next time. But appreciate you joining my show on InView TV today. We'll be back. I've got another show coming up on this Sunday. We've got InView TV tonight with our other show at home, and Let's Get Deeper tomorrow. So thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.
It's all about InView TV. It's all about passion. It's all about change. love.